The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when someone powerful decides to be cruel. Not awkward, not loud, but heavy. I was standing at the end of the conference table, presentation remote still in my hand, slides frozen behind me, numbers strong, clean, undeniable. And then my boss leaned back in his chair, smiled, and said, "Interesting analysis, though it's a little hard to follow with that accent. Where did you say you studied again?" A few people laughed. Not because it was funny, but because silence feels safer than courage. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. I had learned long ago that reacting feeds people like him. I started to answer, but he waved me off, said, "Not Ivy League, but everyone has their place. Let's move on before we lose the room," as if I hadn't just won it. No one defended me. Eyes dropped, papers shuffled, phones appeared. I nodded calmly and sat down while he continued talking, unaware that earlier that same morning I had already accepted a higher offer, higher title, higher salary, and, the most important detail, the very client funding his position was coming with me. After the meeting, he stopped me near the door, lowered his voice, and said, "Don't take it personally. You people are sensitive about these things." "You people?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Understood." That answer annoyed him more than anger ever could. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, city lights outside, rereading the offer letter slowly. Senior Director, Global Accounts, immediate transition, and then the line that changed everything. Primary responsibility, client Meridian. The same client he loved to name drop. The same client that kept his authority alive. The same client that had called me weeks earlier after I fixed a mess he almost caused and said, "We feel safer working with you." The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. Same posture, same calm, same accent he thought limited me. He announced proudly, "Big call with Meridian today." And I watched him speak confidently on work he hadn't done, relationships he hadn't built, value he didn't understand. And that's when I realized his real mistake. He thought I needed this job. At 11:47, my reminder went off. Resignation meeting, 12 p.m. I stood up, walked toward his office, lighter, not because I was leaving, but because I was about to take something with me. I knocked once and stepped into his office without waiting because by then I no longer needed permission. He was smiling at his screen, confident, relaxed, certain that the world still worked the way it always had for him. He said, "Make it quick, I have Meridian in 10 minutes. I closed the door behind me slowly and placed one paper on his desk, my resignation. He frowned like I had annoyed him with something small, asked, "What is this?" I said, "My notice, effective immediately." That made him look up properly. He leaned back, studied me, then smiled the way men smile when they think money fixes everything, and said, "Don't be dramatic. We can talk numbers." I told him I already accepted another offer. His smile tightened. He asked, "Where?" I told him the company name, and that is when his face changed. Not panic yet, but calculation. He said, "Meridian won't like this." I said, "They already know." He said, "You're bluffing." I said, "Your call starts in 8 minutes." At 11:59, his assistant buzzed. "Meridian is on the line." He told me to stay, to clear this up. The screen lit up, familiar faces appeared, the VP, the legal counsel, people who nodded at me but did not smile at him. He started his usual confident greeting, but the VP cut him off and said, "We are making a change effective immediately." He laughed lightly, tried to control the room, said, "If this is about resources." She said, "It's not. We are moving the account entirely." He asked where. She turned her screen slightly toward me and said, "To the firm where she is going." His body stiffened. His hands gripped the chair. He looked at me and said, "You're leaving us?" I said, "I already have." The VP said, "Procurement is informed, contracts are transferring. Thank you for past collaboration." Passed. The call ended and the room went quiet. He stared at the blank screen, then said, "You planned this." I said, "No, I did my job well. You underestimated me. You mocked my accent, my education, my place, and forgot to notice who the client trusted." I picked up my bag and walked out, past desks, past silence, past whispers. By the end of the week, his role was under review. By the end of the month, he was gone. And what I learned is simple. People mock what threatens them. They underestimate quiet strength, and they always lose to preparation. I didn't look back when I left that building because some doors deserve to close without ceremony. My first day at the new firm was quiet. No applause, no announcements, just work. Real work, the kind that speaks for itself. Meridian's team welcomed me with trust, not curiosity, with respect, not questions. Within days, emails started circulating, internal reviews, compliance checks, meetings scheduled without his name on them. People talk when power shifts. They remember things. Suddenly, patterns become visible. Jokes feel different. Complaints sound louder. The HR investigation wasn't about me, but my exit gave people courage. They had been waiting for an excuse, and now they had one. Meanwhile, he tried to recover, called contacts, tried to spin the story, said I was disloyal, emotional, difficult to manage. But stories collapse when facts don't cooperate. The client numbers dropped, the bonuses vanished, executives asked questions he couldn't answer, and the same accent he mocked started echoing in boardrooms, just not his boardroom, mine. Weeks later, I heard he was asked to step aside temporarily. That's corporate language for finished. The man who once decided who belonged in the room was suddenly not invited into it. And here's the part people don't tell you. Revenge doesn't feel loud. It feels calm. It feels like alignment. It feels like waking up without dread and speaking without shrinking. I never raised my voice, never defended myself, never explained my worth. I let my work travel ahead of me. And when people ask now how I handled the humiliation, how I survived the racism, I tell them this: you don't fight every battle. You prepare for the right one. You don't correct every insult. You outgrow the person saying it. And you never, ever let someone who benefits from your silence convince you that you are small. Because the truth is, they mock what they fear. They minimize what they can't control. And they only laugh until the moment you stand up and leave with everything they thought belonged to them. Months passed, and the noise faded. The emails slowed, the gossip moved on, but the consequences stayed. I settled into my role fully, not proving, not performing, just building something solid, something that didn't depend on fear. Meridian expanded the contract. New regions, new responsibilities. My name started appearing in rooms I had never been invited to before. And the difference this time was simple. I was not the exception. I was the standard. Meanwhile, his name became a warning, not spoken loudly, but understood. When people said, "Be careful with leadership choices," they meant him. When HR updated policies, they used examples without names, but everyone knew. When new hires were trained on inclusion, professionalism, respect, they were correcting the damage he left behind. One afternoon, a former colleague messaged me quietly, said, "I just wanted you to know your leaving changed things here. People speak up now. Meetings feel different." I read that message slowly because that is the kind of impact no title gives you, the kind you earn by refusing to stay small. I never responded to him, never confronted him, never explained myself again, because closure doesn't come from watching someone fall. It comes from realizing you are no longer standing where they can reach you. And if there is one truth I carry forward, it is this: humiliation is a tool used by people who have nothing else. Racism survives on the hope that you will doubt yourself long enough for them to stay comfortable. Don't give them that gift. Prepare quietly, Move carefully, and when the moment comes, leave cleanly, because the strongest response to disrespect is not rage, it is replacement. And the day they realize they are no longer relevant in your story is the day they lose all power over it. I did not plan to look back, but life has a way of circling lessons until you fully absorb them. And this is where the story really ends. Not with him, not with the company, not with the client, but with me becoming someone I had quietly been building all along. In the months after everything shifted, I noticed changes in myself first. The way I spoke without measuring my words, the way I entered rooms without scanning faces for approval, the way my accent stopped sounding like something I needed to explain and started sounding like proof of distance traveled, resilience learned, and intelligence earned. I noticed how power feels different when it is not borrowed from fear or titles, but rooted in competence and trust. Meridian grew under my leadership not because I demanded loyalty, but because I never humiliated anyone into silence. I hired people who reminded me of myself years ago, underestimated, overlooked, talented, and hungry. I made it a rule never to confuse authority with cruelty, and never to allow brilliance to be dimmed by ego, because I had seen exactly what that kind of leadership destroys from the inside. Meanwhile, the industry shifted quietly. His name stopped appearing in conversations, invitations dried up. The same executives who once laughed politely at his jokes now avoided mentioning him at all, because corporate memory is selective and ruthless. It remembers results, not arrogance, and it forgets people who mistake dominance for value. I heard through fragments that he tried to rebrand himself. Consultant, advisor, mentor. The words changed, but the pattern followed him, because when someone builds their identity on belittling others, they eventually run out of people willing to stand below them. And here's the truth that took me years to learn. Racism in professional spaces rarely announces itself loudly. It hides behind jokes, tone, feedback culture, culture fit, and concern. It survives because it is subtle enough to deny and sharp enough to wound, and it relies on one thing: your silence, your hesitation, your fear of being labeled difficult, emotional, ungrateful. I carried that fear for a long time. I swallowed comments, laughed when I shouldn't, adjusted myself when I shouldn't, believing survival meant endurance. But survival is not the same as growth, and endurance is not the same as dignity. The moment I stopped proving I deserved a seat and started choosing tables where respect was the minimum requirement, everything changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. I stopped shrinking my voice to fit rooms that were too small. I stopped translating my worth into language comfortable for people committed to misunderstanding it. And I stopped confusing patience with permission, because patience without boundaries is just slow self-erasure. And if there is one lesson I leave with anyone listening to this, it is this: your accent is not a flaw. Your background is not a weakness. Your education is not inferior because someone else names their privilege louder than you name your skill. The world is full of people who will test how much disrespect you will tolerate before you walk away. Do not make the mistake of thinking staying is strength. Sometimes the strongest move is preparation. Sometimes the bravest response is silence paired with action. And sometimes the most devastating answer to humiliation is replacement. Not revenge, not confrontation, not explanation, but growth so undeniable that it rewrites the power structure without asking permission. I never confronted him again, never corrected his assumptions, never waited for an apology, because the apology was irrelevant. The outcome spoke louder than anything he could have said. I outgrew the version of myself that needed validation from rooms built on exclusion, and I stepped fully into spaces where my presence was not questioned, it was required. And that is where this ends. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. They mocked what they could not control, underestimated what they could not understand, and lost what they assumed would always belong to them. And I did not take it from them. I simply stopped giving it to them.